It's great to have you with us. Basharat Peer is a journalist. He has been for many years, and he's come out with a book which is called Curfewed Night. It came out in the year
2009 in
2009.
India and 2010 in the US
Ah,
and UK.
Right. And this was essentially about the conflict that went on in Kashmir
Kashmir.
in the 90s.
Right, and it still continues.
Yes, the conflict
but
continues,
the
but
intensity is, you can say, it's not as intense as the 90s.
Right, absolutely. So, when you grow up
Mhm.
in a place of conflict, which you have, you come from Kashmir, you've grown
Right,
up, you've
right.
seen it up close,
Mhm.
how that translates into literature, into what comes out as,
Words.
words and references
Mhm.
of a certain period. Like you mentioned, this is of the 90s.
Right.
Tell us the process of being able to put this out, because it's obviously very, very close.
Well, it's really doesn't change, differ much from any process of writing. I mean, one of the things with if you're writing about a conflict, I mean, it's some kind of a war, is that it's reality, it's experience of life, intensified. If we talk in those terms, I mean, there are daily struggles and daily conflicts everywhere in the world, whether it's trying to catch a train in Bombay or to hold on to a job, or family issues. In a place like Kashmir, I mean, you have all of that, and then you have an intense political conflict and violence and war and oppression of all kinds. So it is really like, every aspect of your life is so intensified
Yes.
and precarious that you do not know what tomorrow would be like.
Exactly.
I mean, in a very visceral kind of a way, and the awareness of each moment is so fraught with possibilities of where it could go. So when you have lived a life like that, or when a community or a place has lived through that, it's also how do we process that. I think we generally process our lives through stories. And even while, like in the 90s, when we would sit together, when I'm a student, we all told each other stories. And in fact, if you think of Marquez, Gabriel Garcia Marquez, I mean, sort of he called his memoirs "Living to Tell the Tale."
Right.
And in the telling of a story, whether it's at home with your family or with friends in school or at college, those are the ways, as we talk about it and tell and retell the stories, we process the meaning of what we lived through,
Yes.
or what happened,
The
or
story of your own survival.
or what happened to someone in your neighborhood,
Right.
or someone from your college,
Right.
or what did it really mean? Something like this happens. There are new words, there are new languages you learn to describe
Yes.
things that had not happened before.
Right.
And essentially, at some point, you figure it out to a great extent for yourself. But if you happen to be one of those people in a place where where a conflict as intense as Kashmir happens, if you happen to be a young man who wants to be a writer, then the benefit is that you really know what you want to write about.
So there was ready fodder.
Well, you know what you want to write about, but then you don't know what writing about it is like.
And how was it?
That's the hard part. It's processing those stories that you remember or you've shared with friends, or when you open a blank slate. First, there is the craft, the technique of writing. That's a struggle that every writer has.
Sure.
You want to be a better writer than the last guy who published a book, and you have benchmarks. There are literary influences. There are writers you have read and thought about, and you see models.
Sure.
Like for me, I think Orwell is really one of my heroes, George Orwell.
Did you grow up reading him? Was
Yeah,
it
I read
a
every-
1984. Yeah.
84 is, yeah, I love 84, but I think his essayistic writing is some of the best nonfiction writing.
Right.
Like Homage to Catalonia,
Sure.
or his the collected essays, from
Right.
Shooting the Elephant to Bookstore Memories, the whole
So
canon.
that's by way of style, and
But
that's a choice that you're going to make in terms
right,
of
that's by way of style, or Or also, it's also the aesthetic.
The aesthetic.
Like, what will be the tone of your voice?
But I'm guessing that's not right on top of the priority list when you're
Oh,
writing.
no. When you sit down to write, that is fundamental.
Is it?
Because that's what differentiates you from everyone else, crores of people who went through similar experiences.
My understanding was
You're
that
the
when
one guy in that neighborhood making a choice to spend several years of your life behind a computer. People become doctors. They
But is
talk to
that the important choice, Basharat? Or
That
is
is
it
the-
about the period? And it was a period of great strife. And like you mentioned, you were right in the middle of it.
Of course, but there were so many other people.
But you're the one chronicling it.
So the moment, unless you wanted to be a writer, there are many people who feel more passionately about it than even I could. But the moment you make a choice to be a writer, then there are rules.
Mhm.
Because of your love for a place, your land, your people, you do not want to tell their story shoddily.
Mhm.
You want to tell their story in the best way that you can.
Sure.
And that's why the craft is part of the politics and the experience.
The craft becomes a very important part of
Yeah,
the
you don't want
politics
to,
and the
I mean,
experience.
for a place, for a people who went through hell, you don't want to write about them like some bad newspaper writer.
Sure.
I think the enormity or the magnitude of the tragedy and the conflict, you have to respect what those people went through. And if you were fortunate enough to get an education and have the tools, then you better work hard on it and tell that story like it has never been told.
And this is
So-
where I want to draw your attention to what has been in popular culture of late.
Right.
And those are Iranian films.
Sure.
A new genre gets created
Right.
when people start using a certain period of time
Mm-hmm.
of strife to tell a story about
Right.
a people who've
Mhm.
undergone it over that period.
Right.
And that is what I meant, that a new genre gets created.
Of course.
And that becomes the overriding
Like you've seen
driver
the-
of the way a certain work is
if you've
generated.
if you've seen the Schindler's List,
Sure.
it's a great story. But imagine David Dowen making Schindler's List with exactly the same story.
That's exactly
would
what
have been a disaster.
I would imagine so.
Or like any Bollywood filmmaker taking on a subject like that.
And we've seen that happen.
And we've seen that happen with Kashmir too.
Absolutely.
I
So
think
many films based on
almost
Kashmir.
every single film that Indian cinema has made on Kashmir has been a disaster. It's terrible. I mean, they also flops, all of them. There's not a single Indian film
And why do you
made
think
on
that's the
Kashmir.
case, Basharat?
Because people are not stupid. A regular Indian person who goes to watch a movie, he also reads the newspaper, he gets some news on TV, and even if he wouldn't say something to you in public, I think he and she, they kind of understand that something really terrible happened in Kashmir.
Right.
Even if they can't articulate it, but there's an understanding. They'll say कि यार उस जगह बहुत गलत हुआ है. इतनी समझ है लोगों को. That's what they understand. And when you throw a caricature at them, if it's a depopulated and imaginary landscape, कोई अजीब जगह है जहाँ पे कुछ हो रहा है, तो then nobody cares.
But Basharat, tell me, within the politics of Kashmir,
Right.
is it important for you when you're writing a book
Mhm.
to take a stand on what needs to be done or where you stand in the entire debate?
Of course, I stand with my people. I stand in Srinagar.
No, but this is very
That's-
different from being a journalist,
No,
where
as a
you
writer.
need to kind of
No,
have
as a journalist,
an
I
unbiased
can.
approach.
Well, there's nothing unbiased in journalism.
Fair.
Anyone told you that? That's crap.
Absolutely.
That's a bunch of lies.
Fair. So,
I mean, I'm
coming
try-
from that point of view, was it any different writing a book?
It's just the craft is different. You have to hold a story for 250 pages. A newspaper is 500 words. You type it out. This happened. That happened. But even the newspaper. I mean, if you look at the Times of India or the Hindustan Times or the Hindu, any journalist writing it, I look at the text. I don't see an unbiased report. We are trained to read these things.
What was your stand?
My
and
stand
what
was,
is your
you know,
stand? Has it
it's always-
changed over time?
No, it hasn't. I mean, the more you write about a place, the more you understand that you have to write about the terrible things that have been done to ordinary people by people in the power. I write about abuse of authority. and abuse of power. That's what I do. And if common people are being kicked around, I write about that. And that's my politics. That's where I stand. I don't go to, I'm not a munshi for policemen. You know, you go to the press conference, they give you a handout, encounter killing, 5 terrorists killed, and it could be your brother who was picked up and shot and thrown in a ditch. I mean, I think that's disrespect. I respect those policemen who con, or army men who con the journalists, because that's their job. But if you're a writer, your job is to sift through the nonsense. If somebody tells you a story, your job as a writer is to see through it and investigate and find what's the reality.
What's your stand on Pakistan? Because you follow their latest elections very closely. I've seen certain blogs that you've written as well. Tell me what your stand on Pakistan vis-a-vis Kashmir is.
Pakistan stand has, you know, it has evolved a lot. Their stand at the moment is that they're in talks with the Indian government. So there's really nothing much happening there. That, you know, we will talk and we'll resolve all issues through dialogue. One big shift in Pakistan has been in the last sort of 10 years, you can say, was Pakistan earlier used to always talk about Kashmir can only be resolved through UN resolutions, which is like in Nehru's time that happened. That's history. But they have sort of given up on that. Now it's more like, see, at the moment they do have a back channel dialogue going on. There's important diplomats from Pakistan and important diplomats from India talking. You don't see much of that in the papers, but every now and then you get a little bit of it. So I don't think, I mean, you know, one just hopes like, okay, what's happening between the two countries? It's a peace process that's been going on for a while, and every now and then there's a terrorist attack and then it falls and then it comes back again. So it's a tiring process to watch as a journalist or as an analyst.
So are you going to move on from talking about this tiring process, as you call it, because obviously it's taken up a major part of your work, whether it's journalism or
it's an important
literary
process. I don't think my second book also deals with India and Pakistan.
Right.
I mean, where do you go? I live here.
Right.
You know, this is our world.
Right.
I can't just go. I used to live in New York, but I can't just go and suddenly write about Republicans and Democrats.
Right.
I'll hover around here, write about something in India, something in Pakistan, something in Bangladesh, something in Nepal. This is my world.
Right.
And this is what I'll write about.
That's fantastic, and we look forward to more of this in the future. Basharat, many thanks for joining us.
Thanks. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.